All right. Hello, everyone. It's been a while, but we're back. Welcome to another fantastic live video in my Facebook group, the Portrait Photographers Resource. Tonight, as always, we have a special guest, but I'm particularly excited for this guest, and I'll list those reasons later. But for now, I want to introduce you all to the awesome, the talented, the sexy, the artistic Jonny Edward. Jonny, how are you doing, buddy?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me on and letting me be part of this.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Hey, I gotta say before I give a quick intro to you and have you introduce yourself to the world that your setup, your live stream setup is quite fantastic. Is this what do you usually set this up, or is this unique to our live stream tonight?
This is definitely unique to you. So I feel like every time I try and do a stream, I do something a little bit differently. But it was during COVID, everything switched to digital. I wasn't doing any in-person meetings. And I'm like, I have the
Mm.
studio, I have the lights, I have the know-how. So I just started showing up even for, like Saturday morning meetings like this. And it just became de facto. So I just keep trying to outdo myself. But I've never used this backdrop or this setup for anyone else. So this one's specifically for you in the community.
Wow. Well, I am very flattered. And I gotta say, we've had some guests with some pretty stellar backdrops on here, but I think yours takes the cake. Yes, even better than Jerry Guionis.
Oh, sorry,
So
Jerry. Sorry,
yeah,
mate.
so you can next during your next your next conference, your next workshop, you can say, one of my claims to fame is that I had a better live stream backdrop than Jerry Guionis on Sean Lara's image critiques.
The battle of the Jays.
Exactly. Well, for those who don't know Jonny, Jonny is an extremely talented portrait. I would go as far to call you very fine art portrait
Thank you.
photography artist. And one thing I absolutely love about your work is it's just every image tells a story, and I think that's what separates your work so much from quite frankly other almost everyone else. And that's something that's really hard to do, and you do it with your set design, with your lighting, with your emotions. But I want you, Jonny, to give us a little bit of insight about who you are, what you're about, for those who may not know you.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for the kind words. Seriously, now I'm the one flattered. It means a lot to me, and specifically the bit about the storytelling. I think that's something that I really strive for. It's just so to know that that's coming through is really, really a big deal. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jonny Edward. A lot of people in the industry know me as Jonny Creative. That became my IG name long before I picked up a camera, and now I feel like I should probably change my legal name to Jonny Creative because no one even knows my real last name. But I would call myself an editorial portrait photographer. I'm an art director and creative educator. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, although I work on both coasts, create on both coasts, and I actually teach worldwide as well. We could talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, ultimately, I love people and I love photography and I love telling stories. I love learning about people, where they're from, where they're going. And I think for me, photography and being behind the camera has given me an opportunity to celebrate people, to celebrate individuality, to celebrate authenticity, and to try and get to that core truth that for me is that we're all united. We're all a lot closer than we think, and we create these artificial barriers. But ultimately, we all live, we all die, and then we go through very similar experiences and hopefully that big space in between. And I just really want to celebrate people and bring some love and unity and light to a world that can be, pretty hateful and dark too often.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. And I'm just scrolling through some of your images right now to show our viewers at home what you are about. And I mean, this is absolutely fantastic work. And like I was saying, I mean, you capture the human form just so well. And
Thank you.
every one of these images I could spend, 10 minutes on, just really diving into it and trying to find out what the story that's being told is, because it really truly is quite phenomenal. And let me ask you real quick, what have been some of your inspirations? I mean, this to get to this level, it doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah.
So where have you found your inspiration to create your art?
Well, I mean, I think firstly, a lot of people look at my work and I'll hear like phrases like Johnny, you never miss, and that's like flattering, but the reality is I miss all the time. Like we curate our work. So like, for every 100 awful photos I take, I take 3 really good ones. So, we curate. So there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make the mark. So I just want to be clear about that. But for me, I think, firstly, it just started with my own experience, but obviously I'm inspired by photographers, by the photographer community. I really love the old school photographers like Irving Penn, Avedon, Newton, Bresson, Leibowitz, Sarah Moon, Paolo Reversi. And it's not to say there's so many incredible photographers right now, but I feel like the photographers who are coming up in 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, the access to knowledge was different. The process was different. And so thus, like what they put into their work was a different caliber of passion and dedication than what we commonly see now. So I usually look rearward as I'm trying to look forward. Beyond that, I think my 2 biggest influences are probably fine art, specifically sculpture and painting, and cinema. So in the painting world, obviously, Rembrandt and Caravaggio, these concepts of, chiaroscuro and light and shadow really influenced my work. And then sculptors like Rodin, how they work with form and how they express emotion and angst and tension and just the human experience through shape, through line, through structure. And then cinema. I mean, I think I'm really, really driven by cinema, and I sort of think about the sets that I share as mood boards or as guides, stills from a movie. So one of the things that I love to hear is either hey, your work looks like it's a painting, or hey, it looks like it's still from a movie. And anytime I hear either of those, I'm like, oh shit, I'm on the right track. Like I'm doing the right thing aesthetically and energetically. And so those are probably primary. But I love life and I love people, and I try and pull from whatever I can whenever I can.
That's awesome. That's such a great description, really. And I gotta ask you. Well, it's before I ask you that, it seems like it's very clear that you are an art connoisseur. I mean, you just love art, you appreciate art, and
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
pull a lot of inspiration just from all over.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think there's this aspect for me that I think like there's aesthetic in everything. Like there's aesthetic in a doormat, there's aesthetic in a coffee mug, there's aesthetic in a painting at the Louvre or at the Met. So I try and find beauty and magic in everything, but I really try and curate my life. I'm like the things that I wear, the things that I eat, the things that I drink, and not in a way to be elitist. It's not like, oh, I'm better than a person because I'm doing this, but I'm like, anytime that I have an opportunity to express myself or to engage in something that feels more artistic, creative, or just appreciative, I think that's what it really comes down to for me, is just having gratitude for the things around me and in my life. So it's an expression of just love and gratitude for the fact that despite the impossible, we're all here together. And
Right.
somehow we're here on this planet, orbiting a fireball in infinite space. And it's just wild.
I love that, man. And that actually that brings me to my next question, and it actually has to go in a little bit of a different direction, and that is when people first meet you, whether it's at a conference or on set or whatever. I mean, I can say this for myself. The first time I met you, I saw you before I even saw your work. I mean, you are a walking art piece. I mean, you definitely make a very impactful impression on people with your personal style. And I was wondering, you're always you just super sharply dressed. You have amazing artwork on your body. Can you tell us a little bit about that aspect of your personal style and how this came to be? Because everything that you've curated on your body was obviously very well thought out, and I would love
Yeah.
to understand a little bit more about how you got to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when I was younger, I grew up around a lot of tattoos. So, like, my dad was in biker gangs. And so I was always around like these larger than life characters, these like burly guys who were burping and farting and fighting, but like they were these larger than, it was like mythology. So I was around this all the time. And I think even as, a young person, much to my mom's unhappiness, like I was the one who would get like the 25-cent machine tattoos and just, pop out of the bathroom. And I was like all tatted up as this little
Yeah.
blonde kid. And so I think there was just this familiarity, and I kind of deified that in the art form. So there was some predestiny to that. And then I went for a long time without getting tattooed. Like I didn't even get my first tattoo until I was in college. And it was like a half sleeve, and it was something really important to me and significant. And I worked with a great artist. And then I took another hiatus and met my artist out here in Denver. His name is Aries Rising. He owns and runs All Sacred Tattoo here in the city, which is a brilliant tattoo shop. And then we just sort of went off. I had ideas, he had ideas, we were bartering, and then this whole bodysuit thing took place, which I always loved. I
Mm-hmm.
always loved neo-Japanese work, and just I think for me, it's really about world mythology. Like even as a kid, I was involved in different religions and always looking for place and purpose. So all of the art is sort of an ode to Eastern mythology and Western mythology and sort of the stories that we've told to try and find place and purpose in this world. And then in the
Right.
process of those mythologies, I'm kind of like telling my own mythology. So this
Hmm.
is an ode to culture and place, and then this becomes like my own story, so to speak. And so people ask me a lot. They're like, do you have any tattoos that you regret? My answer is no. Am I the same person I was when I got this tattoo done? No. But this is like an honorific to the man that I was, the human being that I was then. So it's sort of like my own story of becoming and
Yeah.
unbecoming and failure and success and all of that stuff. So it's been a wild ride for sure.
That's amazing, man. I absolutely love that. And well, very cool. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, of
And
course.
before we jump into these image critiques, I wanted to ask for those who want to learn a little bit more about you and
Yeah.
who want to learn from you, because you're a absolutely phenomenal educator.
Thank you.
Where should I point people in that direction? Where should I point
So
them
I
to?
mean, you can basically stay updated if you really want to be in the know. Like on my website, there's a form on there that you can go to that you can fill out to just be part of my newsletter. I generally am not like selling things or pushing things on there. It's just like, hey, this is what's going on, cool stuff happening in my world, giveaways and information about that. I teach pretty prolifically, so I'm going to be teaching in Mexico. I was going to say next month, but it's already August because time is blurring by. But I'll be in Mexico for about 2 weeks. I might be doing something with Eli Infante, who's a really, really great artist if y'all don't know
Okay.
him. Based out of Texas here at my studio here in Denver in September. We're working out those details now. I'll be in the south of France in the Bordeaux region teaching a really, really beautiful retreat with Tamara Paskey at this historic French castle in the Bordeaux region of France, which is going to be absolutely wild. I was telling a couple of my friends, I'm like, man, life is so hard. Like I have to go to France and be in a castle and teach art. Like darn. Um, but I'm at all the big conferences too, so I'll be at imaging next year. But yeah, like just jump on my website. I make these announcements on Instagram as well. That's definitely the best place to connect with me.
Great.
This is basically my life. I hate to say it, but I don't really have like a life outside of art in our community. So like,
Yeah.
shoot me a DM or an email anytime. I'm always happy to chat about this. But yeah, I try and keep folks in the know. And if you have any questions at all, ever anyone, drop me a line because I love to chat. Like the hard thing, like I was telling Sean, is to get me to stop talking. So
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how we bring people together, right? Is through just relationship building and talking and
for sure.
having a good time. So but wow, you are really well traveled. You're going all over the place, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't want to brag, but I am going somewhere pretty cool next week. I'm going to Aurora, Colorado. I know it's
Boom.
not as special as maybe France, but big deal.
Hey, Aurora's got cool. So I think that's the funny thing. The more you travel, like you appreciate the world, but you also just appreciate where you're at.
Right.
Like I seriously just went on a walk during meetings today, and I'm in this neighborhood. And for those of you who are familiar with Denver, my studio's in Westminster, and it's just a little historic neighborhood. But I walked around and I found this little garden, and I like picked up some rocks, and I was like, wow, there's some really cool stuff right around me that I just generally don't appreciate. So we always think the grass is greener. It's like, oh, I'm going to go to Europe and it's going to be perfect, and then you get mugged in an airport and
Yeah,
you eat food with
exactly.
food poisoning, and you're like, the world's the world.
Oh man, I have stories about world traveling, but we don't
I
have enough
bet.
time for that. But anyway, yeah. So before we're gonna go ahead and jump in these image critiques, everyone. But before we do that, I just want to quickly let you know that Facebook recently implemented an update that all live videos that are being streamed to Facebook are only going to be up now for 30 days, and then they automatically
Mm.
get deleted. And I learned this because I was looking for some of the previous live streams and I couldn't find them, and that was why. So if you've been wanting to look at some of the past live streams we've done, what you can all do is you can actually go to my YouTube page, and I have it pulled up on the screen right here. Just search Sean Lara Photography, and you'll actually have access to all the live stream videos that we've done for the past 2 years. So make sure you subscribe to me on YouTube if you haven't already, so you can have access to those and see them, including this one, in the future. So with that said, Jonny, are you ready to dive into this, my dude?
I am here for it. Let's do it.
All right, awesome. So I just need to pull up a couple of different things here. I'm going to pull up the first image, and actually I need to pull up the info. So 1 second here. Oh, I'm in the wrong Google Drive. That's why I was like, why can't I find it? Here we go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with this very first image. Can you have it on your screen, right, Jonny?
Yep, I have it on my screen. This
All
is
right.
number one, correct? That we,
Yep.
as far as our numbering goes.
Exactly. So I'm going to pull it up here for everyone else to see at home. Here we go. So this first image comes from Radon Burton. And Radon said here that she captured this with a Canon R6 Mark II, 70-200 using a Geekoto GT200 with a Magmod 42-inch softbox camera left. Now, as always, everyone, real quick before I forget, I am looking. I have 3 screens here, and one of the screens I have all of your comments pulled up. So if you have any questions or you want to weigh in, I will be monitoring the comments to the screen on my right. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this, and then Jonny, you can jump in. But Radon, first of all, I want to say fantastic attempt. What I love, kind of things I love about this image is that you have, you know, this nice color palette that complements each other really well. You have this nice lavender dress that your model or your subject here is sporting, and then you also have her conveniently placed in this lavender, and I'm sure that wasn't an accident, and I think having that intentionality, it was really smart. Couple things I would probably recommend you change just for the sake of making the image a little bit stronger. So, and the first thing I'm going to recommend, and probably the biggest thing, is just the lighting, right? So one thing I always try to encourage the people that I educate and talk to is to match your, if you're using off-camera flash with natural light, I always recommend to try to complement that natural light, the off-camera flash to the natural light. And in this particular situation, you have your sunlight coming in from camera right, but then you have your artificial light coming in from camera left. So basically what's happening is you have these two competing light sources, and it makes it kind of tricks the eye a little bit, where it stops you in your tracks and you're like, wait a minute, there's something that doesn't quite look right here. So what I would recommend next time is to light it from camera right, maybe reposition your subject a little bit differently so she's turning into your light, so she's short lit as opposed to broad lit, and that is going to make it a little bit more believable. I would also, on that note, maybe underexpose your natural light just slightly more so you can pull up some more color from that lavender, because it's what's happening is you have a lot of these highlights on the top of the tips of the lavender, and it's kind of blowing them out a little bit. Really, those are my, I would say, my key critiques. Jonny, I'm sure I'm leaving a couple things out. So is there anything else that you would add to this?
No, I mean overall, I want to say that same thing. I'm a big sucker for color, so I do really love the palette here. Like all of the purples and the wildflower theme, like it really hits for me color wise, in terms of the overall vibe there. And I do like the sort of the haze that's coming from shooting directly into the sun. That's a big thing that I do. I mean, even now in this setup, it's like I have a backlight coming on me, and so it's creating some haze here. So I really like that look. I think that's a great way to create some texture and sort of like some intrigue in the photo itself. I'm with you. Before you even said it, that was one of my thoughts as well, as far as regarding the off-camera flash relative to the sunlight. I think bringing that in from the right and potentially feathering it or playing with that could lead to a more organic feel. I do a lot of that in my studio too. My favorite thing is if I'm using 5 lights and someone's like, how'd you get one light to look like this? And I'm like, very carefully. But I'm with that, entirely. The only other thing I could see here is, like you said, I think, allowing some more of that, or dropping the ambient light a little for detail there, and maybe even, playing with the blacks and a little bit of that type of stuff here as well. So adding some contrast, not globally, but specifically into the blacks, to add a little bit more depth and dimension into this. There is that beautiful play of that tree line being so far behind the subject. And I think if there was a little bit more density in those blacks, it would still feel really organic, but we would see a little bit more of the layering in terms of the spatial relationship in this photo too. And that could, potentially bump it up a notch in terms of just visual intrigue and overall impact. But it's a really lovely image, overall, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. Radon, she's a regular contributor, so thank you so much as always for
Yeah, thank you.
for submitting. And she's usually right on it as soon as I post it. She's one of the first people always. So,
Boom.
so yeah, thanks for being prompt, Radon.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on to image number 2. So this one comes from, let's see here. It comes from Judith Deneen. And Judith, she shared quite a bit of info. She used a 200-watt strobe in front of her, facing down at me. My camera is positioned for a horizontal capture set up at ISO 200 at 46 millimeters, f8, and a 200-second of a shutter. She used 2 different V flats, a whole V flat to camera right and a half flat to camera left. Then she used some Walmart LED lights to slightly light up the backdrop. She positioned herself directly in the middle of the frame, so it looks like this is a self-portrait. Then posed myself as casual as possible. To be honest, this self-portrait session, I laughed at myself a lot, though I wanted something a little bit moodier, darker. So with that said, Jonny, why don't you jump in first and kind of let us know what pops out at you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I just want to commend you, Judith, for taking self portraits. I don't think that enough photographers, especially people who photograph other people, spend time in self portraiture. It's a thing that creates a lot of nerves for people, and it's been one of the biggest things that I've done to really elevate my craft and also connect to myself as an artist and photographer. So, like, big kudos on getting in front of your own camera. I love the descriptive detail here and the fact that you're taking notes and making sure even you're already critiquing yourself in this, and I think there's a really really big thing about that. Overall, I like the mood of this. You feel confident and you feel relaxed. I feel like the light does play well with the mood in general. If I was just looking at this purely technically outside of the mood, one thing that I sort of notice out of the gate, and we see this a lot in the style of imagery, and I have to check myself on it too, is just the disparity in the brightness of the hands versus the face. And so obviously this has to do with the modifier that's being used and the distance that's there. It's not that it's right or wrong, but we have to remember that when someone's viewing your image, they're going to see the point of greatest brightness, greatest contrast, and greatest color saturation first. So in this case, a casual viewer is going to go to your hands first. That's not good or bad, but it just means that if you're trying to focus on you as a traditional portrait subject, they're finding your face after they find your hands. Now, if you were selling a ring or a piece of jewelry, it was commercial work, that's a great way to draw attention to that. But in this, I think we kind of missed the face. So we could play with orientation here. We could have angled the light a little bit differently, or if we were in post, we could even just create some masking on those hands to bring the highlights down a little, or even punching up, some of the light on the face just a smidge to create a little bit more balance between the hands and the face. Same thing here that I said last time, and that is I think we could play with a little bit more density in the blacks too. Of course, that's something that we could do in the moment, but for me, I would probably just play with the blacks and shadows just a little bit in post. And overall, I really like the tonality of this, but I think if we had a little bit more richness and density in the blacks, there'd be a little bit more dimensional punch. Beyond that, I think it's just playing. So I do like the pose. The fact is you felt relaxed. You seem relaxed and easeful here. And I think just playing with hand position and some other things and just getting a series out of it could be really great. But, really, really lovely self-portrait. Well done. And once again, kudos for getting in front of your camera because it's not an easy thing to do for us photographers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Jonny. Let me ask you a question. How do you feel? You alluded to it a little bit, but how do you feel about what's going on with her fingers? Does it feel a little awkward to you? Maybe do something different?
I think even like the shapes. So it's like if I was sitting here like this, because we have defined shapes in there, like our brains look for patterns and shapes. So even subconsciously, I think because of the shapes there, your eyes are kind of drawn to that. So between the highlights being brighter and the shapes. So I think if it was a little bit more closed or if they weren't quite here, like it's very interesting, but that's the point. Because it's so interesting, we're visually drawn to that sort of interest and visual intrigue. So if it was something that wasn't quite so structured, I do think that it would play a little bit more, mood wise and expression wise and that type of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, like I said, everything you mentioned, I agree with. The only thing I would probably add is just a couple small things. And the first thing I noticed was, the hands were a little bit brighter and relative to her face. Specifically, I would almost like to see her eyes, a little bit more light on her eyes, illuminated a little bit better. And that's something, you could do either just by making adjustments to your light source or even just in post-production, just kind of bringing them up slightly, just because, the eyes convey a lot, right? I mean, you can tell someone's mood just by looking at their eyes. So I feel like brightening those eyes just a little bit will give a little bit more perspective as to what's going on in the picture. And then also just a little bit more intentional with, maybe some of your accessories. So, you're having a lot of attention drawn to your hands. And because of that, it's a big part of the story. And I'm looking at the ring and I'm looking at her watch sticking out. Were those intentional? Yeah. Are those part of the photo or again, are we just playing around and just to test lighting and everything? So just things to think about. You want to be very intentional with everything from your lighting to your set placement, to your posing. So
I love that.
Yeah. Judith, thanks so much for submitting it. I think it was the first image
you.
I've seen from you. So it was really cool. Okay, so this photo comes from Bob Younger. He's local to Fort Collins, so you may or may not recognize this spot. Johnny, but Jesse was in FOCO from Virginia, and we decided to wake up early on Saturday morning to hit the main streets of Fort Collins to capture some flying dress images. The sky was really blah at sunrise, but we did some shots in the streets, and then this one in front of the Bondi Beach Bar, which I highly recommend none of you ever go to. She was lit with a Godox 200 watt strobe and a Magmod 24-inch softbox on a stand as the key light. The dress was tossed by her husband and was lit with another 200 watt strobe and a Magmod Magsphere on a stand to the right and to the rear of her dress. In post, he removed some of the distracting lights and cords, did a sky swap because the original sky sucked. The bird was there and he left him, so nice capture there. Masked the background and the subject and adjusted lighting color vibrance as needed, added some paper texture to the background and called it good. So that's what we got to work with. What do you think, Johnny?
So, I mean, overall, it's a very impressive image. Going back to it, I think like that first image we looked at, I really like the color play here a lot. Like, I'm not personally one for saturated colors. You don't see a lot of it in my work, but I appreciate the use of saturated color when it's done well. So I think the interplay of the reds and the cool tones really, really works for me. If I'm being completely honest, sometimes I do just have a few qualms with the flying dress images in general. So it's not necessarily my cup of tea, but to that end, and this specifically, what I'm looking at is, the flags there on the left side of the building, like to my eye, they seem to be moving off to the left slightly. So it looks like if there's any natural wind, it's sort of pushing them left in the frame, and then the dress is going right. So this kind of is like what you were talking about with the lighting in that first photo. So it looks like the wind's moving one way in one part of that image and in another way in another. If we wanted to actually say, hey, there was a gust of wind blowing the dress. So the relative unnaturalness of that just throws me a little, even though I think this was a beautiful capture of the dress and the shape. Also, for me personally, given the model and the height of the building and things like that, I would love to see, Bob, you maybe explore, if you don't already have the shot, in a similar scenario, having the model stand up. So I think with her sitting and the length of that dress and sort of like the height of that dress, she's almost marginalized, especially because the building's so tall. So I think given that she looks like she has really great proportions there, it might have been nice to build her up and make her a bit more statuesque relative to the environment and that dress being thrown. But once again, other than that, I love the intentionality and the lighting here. I think you really work that in. Obviously, you have a workflow, but overall, the colors are great. And I think the last thing that I would say is if I was catching anything else, in the upper left-hand corner of the frame, we have that tree coming in. And going back to like in my images, I kind of like to look at things as like this one is not like the other. Where is my attention being drawn? And it just is being drawn up there to that left. So since we did a sky swap anyway, it might be worth exploring taking that tree element out of that upper left corner and letting the sky fill the frame left to right instead of having that asymmetrical disparity. Since there's already so much symmetry with the building, it just feels weighted to the left with that tree, the flags, and everything else for me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Really good points, Johnny. And there's a couple more I actually want to add, but before a couple of specifically some distracting elements before I say my piece. I want to really quickly address that tree because that's a very good point. But I almost I don't want to say I disagree, but I want to say in this particular situation, I feel like it could go either way. And the reason why I don't think it's necessarily that distracting is because you have that tree on the right of the frame that kind of complements it and gives it that
Yeah,
balance. So if
absolutely.
that tree wasn't there on the right of the frame, I would say 100% completely agree. But I feel like because there is that tree, there is that greenery, you have
Yeah,
that balance. So it could work, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Um, there are a couple things though I would do to clean up the image just a little bit, right? And that's just some small distracting elements. For example, we'll start with her. When you look at her dress, she has a couple like these really sharp wrinkles kind of right in the middle of the train, and I feel like if you were to edit those out in post production, it would just feel a little bit more elegant, a little bit more well thought out. So I would probably just go back in, retouch up those wrinkles, smooth it out a little bit. Also, and while we're on the subject of her train, if you look right above the train, I don't know why, but for me, it's just a little distracting. You have this little like postcard that's stuck on the window, and I feel like just editing that out real quick will make a big difference. And then in kind of continuing the theme of distracting elements, right above her head, there's that illuminated window sign. I would probably almost get rid of that. In fact, I might even get rid of all of them. I just feel like it doesn't really add to the elegance of this woman in this long flowy dress. You have this beautiful old historic building, and then you have some beer. Some beer lights, right? So I would recommend maybe, especially if you were to submit this for competition, that's probably something I would recommend doing. I could talk a little bit more about the pose and how maybe I'd like to see her a little bit more open, not so closed off, but I don't want to dive into that too much. The last thing I would say though is maybe playing around with the warp, the perspective tool in Lightroom, because it's almost like the building is warped a little bit, where the face of the window isn't necessarily symmetrical, and I would almost like to see just the left side of the frame pulled forward a little bit, just to make it a little bit less distorted. But those are just a couple of small nitpicking things to a otherwise a fantastic photo.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think one of the cool things too, Sean, is like you talking about the tree thing. Everyone, this is the point too, right? Like when we're critiquing this, like this is all subjective. So we're
Of
all looking
course.
at this from different places, and it depends on what's being said and what intention is and everything else. So like don't take what we say as gospel. We're just two talented photographers who have our own perspective and vision, and these are just personal opinions. So everything's with a grain of salt always.
Exactly, and you couldn't be more correct. Like, art is so subjective, and I mean, remember, I think it was like a couple of years ago there was that art piece of that banana stuck on the wall with duct
Yep.
tape. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect example.
Bella.
Oh, that's great. Well, anyway,
It was
Bob,
wild.
thank you so much for submitting this photo. Always great seeing
Yeah,
your
thank you,
work.
Bob.
Yeah, another Fort Collins photographer here. We got a photo from Mark Creary, and no info attached to this image, so we're gonna go ahead and take it at face value.
Okay.
I think I started. No, you started last time, so I'll
Oh,
right.
it's on you.
It
Yep.
is on
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Okay,
It's your
great,
go.
great.
Your go.
Yeah, right on. So yeah, so I want to start at the things I find very positive about this image, and that is the the expression on her
Yeah.
is awesome. I mean, that's in my opinion, that's the highlight of this photo. She looks genuinely very happy. She loves to embrace this guy. This, I'm assuming it's her fiance or boyfriend or something. And seeing that genuine smile is great. It's a very warm image, and it puts a smile on my face. There are a couple things I would maybe address here. And for starters, and this is kind of more personal style, right? So take this again with a grain of salt. But I find that the image is a little bit almost too contrasty. We have too much. The blacks are just a little bit too pronounced, and we have these really harsh shadows, especially under his arm. Not a lot of detail in the scene, and I almost feel like because of that, this image would almost work better as a black and white.
Hmm.
But again, take it with a grain of salt. The other thing too is I'm a little distracted by the the pose a little bit, and what's happening here is we're seeing too much of his back and not enough of, in my opinion, what's important in the moment, right? So his face, we're not seeing his face at all. It's buried behind her, so we don't see his expression. We see this big white shirt, and again, like you were saying earlier, your eye goes to the brightest part of a scene generally. In this case, it's that shirt, and you just see this bright white shirt. So maybe try to experiment with some different posing that not only flatters both of them a little bit more, but shows his expression as well. And then obviously, just some small things I would recommend changing to. For example, repositioning your light a little bit where we're illuminating a little bit more of their body, changing his pose a little bit so he's not so closed off and his feet aren't so close together. Having him tuck in his shirt, right? It's a little sloppy. Have him tuck in his shirt. I recommend to all my couples to buy shirt stays, or I should say all my grooms to buy shirt stays that helps keep your shirt tucked in. That's why when you're seeing people like me and Jonny who are dressed super well all the time, our shirts are always tucked in. It's because we're wearing shirt stays. But
Yes, sir.
just a couple small things that could elevate this a little bit more. Johnny, I'm sure you're seeing some stuff that I'm not. What else are you seeing?
No, no, I agree. And that was all really great. And it's so funny because I didn't really envision it in black and white until you said it. And then I was like, oh, now I want to see this in black and white.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like very similar stuff. I agree regarding, the shirt and sort of the play there. Like coming back to the light, it's, sort of this thing that we're going on about now. But I think there is a recurring theme in that in photography. And, we have this beautiful warm light that's cascading over the scene, which is obviously gorgeous. And that was really well captured. And then we even see that in the lake. So what we're seeing is the direction of that light, but we're also seeing the color of the light. And then I'm assuming that there is, some off-camera flash coming in here with a small modifier coming in camera left. And the two things that strike me about that are the direction of the light, as we talked about before, but also the color of the light. So, we probably have, let's say a 2000 Kelvin difference or somewhere between 1 and 2000 Kelvin difference between that natural light and the strobe light coming in. So the first thing that I would do, and this is potentially, rock a quarter or half CTO on that off-camera flash piece to warm that light up. So that's going to warm her skin up. That's going to warm the blues up. That's going to warm all of the flesh up. And it's going to play into that sun a little bit more. And then potentially playing with either the modifier or the position of that light. That is, if you have a bigger modifier, using something that's going to be more broad, which is going to reduce contrast and illuminate more of the scene. Or if you only have one, bringing that in closer to essentially soften that light and create a little bit less contrast and something that feels a little bit more organic there. Those would be my big bits. I agree with all of your cues on this too, Sean. The only other thing that I see that is slightly distracting to me, and it's hard because I like it, but it still feels distracting, is the position of her foot. I think the foot is really cute and it has that like old school, someone getting the kiss right before someone goes off to war, comes back from it. So it's kind of part of our iconography here. But at the same time, because the foot's just floating in the water, especially in that gradient of water from black to, essentially yellow or white, it just is sort of floating in the scene for me. So with that background, I might have, liked to have seen that foot being pivoted down a little bit more as we're shifting some of the position. But once again, this is just something that we would all be playing with as we were working with that couple in real time and kind of going through a little bit of flow posing with them to see what works best relative to that scene and the lighting.
Yeah, great additions to what I had to say. That's awesome, Johnny. Cool. Well, Mark, as always, thank you for submitting your photo.
Yeah,
It
thanks,
was
Mark.
really nice to talk about this. Okay, moving on. This photo comes from another regular contributor. This is from Brian Green. No photo info attached, so we'll take this one at face value as well. Why don't you
All
start?
right.
Oh, I
So,
think
I mean,
Johnny, I think I lost you.
oh
Video.
no, really?
I think I lost you video
Let me
wise.
let me let me double check my setup real quick for you, Sean. I might just got to swap a battery because I'm a bad photographer.
No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. While we're waiting for you to do that, I just want to ask you all a question. What should you do if you have a seaweed allergy? Well, it's actually quite simple. You should see kelp. Ha ha.
Already hard.
Ha ha.
The man
Yes.
has
Hey,
jokes,
you're
though.
back.
Yeah,
You're
and
back.
it was absolutely a battery. It's funny because we got on here and I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be fine. Of course, to be honest, I even do that when I'm shooting on set. I'll have a tech come up to me and they're like, "Hey, Johnny, you need to swap your battery." I'm like, "No, no, it'll be good." I always think there's more juice than there is, but I always have backup batteries. So there's the lesson, everyone: have 10 backup batteries because 5 of them might be bad. You might lose 3, and there you go. One last little thing here.
No worries.
Sony's gonna hate me for this. I know everyone. You're supposed to use OEM batteries, but I got the generics stacked up, so it tells me that my camera is going to melt down and the world's going to end if I use a non-first party battery. But we won't get into that. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, here's this image. What do you think about this one, dude?
so first of all, Brian, thank you for submitting this. Like I right away, it's like I actually really like the contrast of the stark black outfit and the red background. I'm going back to it. I don't use red a lot. I don't use saturated colors, but I think here it works. And for me, there's a really interesting juxtaposition because the subject kind of has this like really relaxed pose. It's almost kind of like pensive and easeful, but then red is such a bold color. So for me, this is something where I feel like that contrast works and the juxtaposition energetically is really, really nice. For me, I don't work with paper a lot. And the reason being is because of how paper interacts with light. You wind up getting a lot of gradient in paper. You wind up seeing a lot of pronounced shadows in paper. And especially if you're using a sweep, like we're seeing here in the bottom right-hand side of the image, you get light that plays differently. So you have like midtones, highlights, and shadows all within that image itself. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with the gradient, but here, just a little bit of that patchiness for me kind of throws me. We have like those patches of shadow in the upper right hand corner, and then we have that patch of extreme sort of like midtone going into highlight at the lower right hand side. And so that's where my eyes are drawn in the image right away. And then there's that leading line that kind of goes through her knees. So, this is something that we could have adjusted in that moment, Brian, obviously by altering our lighting or things like that, or even cleaned up in post. I know a lot of folks are using things like Evoto to clean up backdrops like this, and it makes it pretty foolproof right away. But I would have just liked to seen the backdrop being a little bit more harmonious, not necessarily a flat color, but not seeing as big of a variation in sort of the tonality that's coming from the variations in the luminosity. So we're getting darker patches of red, lighter patches of red. It's looking a little orange. It's looking a little red and going into black even in those shadows. So that would be the really big thing. Otherwise, I like the pose. I might crop this up just a little bit higher. I think relative to angle, it's cropped pretty close to ankle, and that might be creating some foreshortening. And then, lastly for me, I would probably bring that left elbow out a little. So camera right, the left elbow, we have that really nice negative space that I appreciate on her right, our left, but then on our right, her left, it's just kind of gone into the body and that arm's just floating and gone. So I think playing with some of that, the backdrop, and then just altering the arms to show a little bit more negative space symmetrically, that would definitely take it up a notch for me. But it really is very compelling. I like this image a lot.
Definitely. So we have a question, Jonny.
Yeah.
Tony Luizzi is asking, how can you tell that the backdrop is paper? What is telling you that what is telling you that it's paper?
So I mean, let's like everyone. If you don't know this about my work, I work with a lot of canvas backdrops, and like canvas, because of the way the paint's layered and the gesso's layered and everything on with it, like you don't have that same degree of what I would call reflectivity from the paper from canvas. So like I know this is paper right away because we're seeing the way that the light's playing into the crease where we're actually sweeping at the bottom of that backdrop. And then also you can tell in that upper right hand corner where there's that shadow part, what's probably happening is the paper roll is puckering up top. The light's coming in from camera right, it's catching some of that pucker, and then it's throwing that shadow into the corner. So one of the reasons why I like working with canvas is just because it plays with light in a way that's a little bit more forgiving, I guess is the best way of putting it. Whereas you're going to see any discrepancy, any wrinkles, any misshaping in the paper, especially if you're working with that really beautiful angular light, right? You're trying to get more drama out of your light, then you're going to be exaggerating any imperfections in the paper and really creating some distracting elements a lot more readily than if you were using something like a textured wall or a canvas backdrop or something like that.
So just for the viewers at home, your backdrop right now, is that a canvas? Is that a painted canvas?
So it's actually it's a printed like muslin, I guess is the best way of putting it. So these are from Baby Dream backdrops. I don't use them enough. I like them a lot, but it's almost like a microfiber material. So this isn't canvas. I could swap the camera around. Ironically, this is the one time I don't have canvas on my set, but this is the same thing because it's like a microfiber material and we have variations in texture and tone. Even though we're coming at this from a really hard oblique angle, there is, micro wrinkles and things like that in there, but you're just not seeing it in the same way that you would with paper because it's just more forgiving to directional light.
Gotcha. Yeah. And we like Baby Dream backdrops. They're homies of ours. So
yeah, they're such great people. Outside of making great drops, they're just really, really great humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Honestly, I don't really have much more to add to Brian's photo. Really, maybe the only thing I would say is just watch those specular highlights a little bit on the skin tones.
Yeah.
Just tone those down slightly. I'm looking at the photo on 3 different monitors right now, and on one monitor it's very obvious, and on the other 2 it's a little bit more subdued. So that'd probably be my only critique further than what you said. So so that's all I'm going to say. But Brian, thank you so much for submitting as always.
Thanks, Brian. Great work.
Whitney Minton, who's watching right now, she says, "See, Sean, Jonny uses Baby Dream. LOL." She was giving me a little bit of shit earlier because I took some photos recently on a non-Baby Dream background. So she was,
shame, Sean, shame.
Yeah, I know. She was like, "Whose backdrop is that?" But
unacceptable, dude.
So yeah, definitely want to give them a shout out though, because they're awesome. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. We're gonna go ahead and pull up this next photo from photographer Locke Lee. And I guess it's my turn to jump in. And Locke's photos are always so challenging to critique because he is so methodical and he's so intentional with his photos, and he is a phenomenal photographer from Seattle. And this is actually very different than what he usually submits. He usually does a lot more environmental portraits, similar to what I do. So I'm
Okay.
assuming, again, going back to the intentionality, he was very intentional with submitting this photo because he knew that you were our guest critiquer tonight. And what I'm going to say is this is honestly a little bit out of my depth. I'm not going to be able to give you the best critique because this is just so out of my wheelhouse. So I'm going to say what I like about this image, and that is the skin processing. Everything is
Yeah.
very smooth, but it's not overly smoothened, right? Like I know as a professional that this was retouched, but I don't feel like anyone else would be able to know that, and that is a huge compliment. The
Yeah.
light is very soft. You have that nice a nice shadow on her right side of her nose, so it has some dimensionality to it. The soft bokeh and the shallow of the field adds to that ethereal, angelic kind of look as to what you're alluding to here, Locke. So there's just so much to love about this image, but I don't want to take the spotlight away from you too much, Johnny, because I feel like this is more of your wheelhouse, and I'd really would
Yeah.
like you to jump in and talk about this.
Yeah, please. So first of all, Locke, once again, like I'll second that. Really beautiful work, gorgeous color palette right out of the gate. I mean, this looks like a makeup palette to me, and I feel like that's how I tend to shoot a lot of my work. So beautiful use of color, especially relative to the undertones in her skin and her hair. Very, very thoughtful, and even the layers of color. That's something that I do a lot in my work too. Is I don't just create layers with light; I create layers with color and texture. And so we see depth here through those layers, even with the bokeh, which I think is really, really beautiful. Same thing with the processing. I think that was a great note, Sean. That's really, I mean, that's the best note from a photographer to say, like, I know this is retouched, but no one else would, because that means it's subtle and it's really proper. Also, I just have to speak to that tiny hint of the rim light, on the right side of her temple, camera left for us, because it's really beautifully done.
Mm-hmm.
Getting a rim light to look that soft and the position to be just
It's
right is
tough.
challenging. Really, really tough. So kudos on that, because I can tell that was done with a lot of intention and love. Overall, I think this is really strong. The distracting element for me personally in this specific image, and I'll explain this for two reasons, are the hands coming over the tops of those wings. So because those fingers are creeping over on camera left and camera right, and her arms are back, I'm not seeing where those hands are necessarily coming from. And so for me, those fingers coming here are kind of floating in the frame. And because we don't see the relation between her arms, her forearms, her upper arms to that, it kind of catches me off guard. And I'm like, are those her hands? Are those someone else's hands? And so you almost have to have an inference of that. Also, I like the fact that what it reads to me is as though, Locke, you used a wider angle lens, possibly a 35 or maybe even a 28 or something here. And I love that because I use 35s all the time. So as soon as I saw this, I was like, yes, someone else using a 35. Like I'm in the anti-85 establishment. No, I use that too. But I really like that. But then, because we're using a 35, we have that proportional difference. So since the hands are back in the frame, the head is forward, the chest is kind of forward. Not only are those hands floating, but the relative proportion makes them significantly smaller relative to her body as well. So, I would love to see this same exact photo, same exact everything, either with her hands, behind those wings, so the fingers are coming out entirely, or maybe bringing the hands in front of the wings into the frame so that they're reading proportionally and we're seeing a connectivity there. But other than that, I really don't have any feedback in this. I mean, it is a really beautifully processed, shot, lit image. Once again, clearly with a lot of intention, a lot of love, and a lot of skill. So really well done, Locke.
Yeah, absolutely. Seriously, great photo. I
Yeah.
love so much about this. So I'm not gonna embarrass myself by trying to critique it because it's yeah, it's pretty solid. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on. You might recognize this name and this photo.
I do indeed.
This comes from Paul Sebastian, and this is from a workshop with Johnny this past
Yep.
weekend.
I
So
know I was going to say the photo's perfect. The instructors were perfect. No critiques. No,
no
yeah,
critiques, it's flawless.
excellent. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to jump in on this first or if I should. Sean, you let me know.
Yeah, no, why don't just to keep maintain the order of things, why don't you jump in?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, Paul, thank you for being at the workshop. Rick Lewis and Kayla Douglas and I had a workshop down in Atlanta before the Boca Summit.
I love
And it was
them,
a
by
really,
the
really,
way. Yeah.
they're amazing human
Rick and
beings,
Kale.
amazing artists. They're such just sweet, genuine human beings. So if you're watching, y'all, we love you. Tons of love for you. If you don't know Rick and Kayla, find out who they are because they're great people and great artists.
He was
This
a
was one of our
critiquer earlier this year, so most
yeah
most of my
yeah
audience knows him.
yeah, he's good. So y'all know Rick's good people.
Yeah.
So this was Tyler. This was one of our models, and basically, we started by putting this backdrop on there, and then kind of built it out. I will say right out of the gate, I don't think I saw you create this, Paul, but I love what you did posing wise with Tyler. This is like a very classical, neoclassical pose, and it feels like something that you could actually see in like a painting of someone like Caravaggio. That's what we were doing thematically with this. So I really love where you went with that aspect of it. The posing, the emotion, everything in here is really solid. I think you did a really great job balancing shadow and light. And when I say that, I mean that specific lighting setup, it would have been really easy to lose the detail of the wings. And I'm not saying a ton of detail in the blacks, but enough to know that there are
Mm-hmm.
wings there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not so bright that we're losing the contrast, but it's also not so dark that we're losing what's actually happening in the scene. So really, really good job balancing that out. On my monitor, I will say this is a caveat, everyone, too. I know Sean alluded to this earlier. Depending on how you're looking at an image, it's going to look different on a different screen. Like I don't have my calibrated BenQ right now. I'm using my MacBook, which is also going to look different than if I was looking at this on my iPhone. But if looking at this on my Mac right now, on my MacBook, the red through the shadows in the shoulders and in the neck are just a little bit intense for me
I
because
see
the
that.
only other
Yep.
place we see those is in the hand. So the red kind of pulls me out. So if that red was threaded through more of the image, I think it could be workable. But I would like to see Paul maybe just bringing that red down a little. So using HSL or a mask, toning that red down just a smidge, bringing the saturation down, maybe bringing the luminosity down, and even shifting the hue a little bit more toward yellow or brown, I think would be interesting. Beyond that, the highlights are a little bit punchy here, but going back to that Caravaggio vibe, I think it really works because you're really showing off the difference between highlight and shadow. So you have a really broad tonal range here, but that would be something else potentially to play with and see what you like best. Maybe toning down those highlights a little and just bringing them down a bit. But beyond that, I really, really like this a lot. I like the fact that you went more yellowed with the overall vibe here. I think that works with that painterly type of feel and with the canvas and the colors that were being used. But predominantly, I would just look at those reds and sort of playing with that a little bit and then see where that takes the image and see how you feel about it.
Definitely. Yeah, the tonality here is phenomenal. I absolutely love the processing. I love that you see this like when you look, especially it's noticeable on, I'm not sure what it is, like a toga or whatever you want to call this. But you see a little bit of this micro grain that almost looks like this is a
Yeah.
painted image, and it's phenomenal. There's a couple things that I feel like actually I want to point out, and I'd love to get your feedback on it. And that is first, and you alluded to this a little bit. The brightest part of the scene is his chest, so your
Yeah.
eye immediately goes to his chest. So would you recommend maybe you tone that down and then bring up the light on his face?
Absolutely. And it's so funny that because I was actually just processing one of these images literally earlier today. So it's kind of coincidental and ironic. But what I did is I used Capture One for my raw processing. So I used the AI tools just to create a face mask. And I just bumped up the highlights using levels a little bit in the midtones in the face. And so I think doing that, bringing up a little bit of the punchiness in the face and highlights and midtones, and then bringing those highlights down in the chest is going to create a little bit more balance through there. Going back to it, if someone was going to composite this, or let's say we had, an arrow to the chest or something here, that light being predominantly here, I think would make more sense to me. But yeah, a little bit more balance there, I think would really, take this up just a smidge. It's already really stellar, but it would be one of those details that takes something from, amazing to really fucking amazing.
Yeah, right. No, definitely. For sure. And and on the note of lighting, for a photo like this, I always generally tend to recommend to people, how to have your subject turn their chin towards the light. In this case, they're turning it away from the light. Does that work here, or would you have preferred to maybe see him turn into the light?
So in this case for me, it works. It's funny because I really didn't have Tyler pose like this. I had his face toward the light in almost every photo I have of him. But I think like it's almost for me, it feels like a rejection of the light. And going back to Caravaggio and like the biblical themes and allegorical themes, I think it's kind of like you have this potential angel who's rejecting the light.
Oh, okay.
So I'm projecting here, but because of my bias, I'm like I think that it was a really cool conscious choice to say like, hey, in this turn we have the winged angel or however you want to phrase that, who's saying no. the light's not for me type of thing, especially with the gesture of the hand. So I find it intriguing. I think it could have been very interesting facing the light, but aesthetically, I actually like this. I think there's an interesting story there, or at least the one that, the ADHD brain inside my skull is constructing.
Right on, right on. And then my final question for discussion would be his eyes. He's looking very far camera right, so you don't see his pupils at all. I actually kind of think it almost works here because it almost makes it more like demon like.
I agree with you 110%.
Okay.
Yeah, no, like 99% of the time, I would look at that and say, hey, we could have brought eyes back, not necessarily to camera, but closer to camera so we weren't looking at the whites. But I'm with you on this. I think it adds like that surrealist demon element. And so for this specifically, what I would normally be like, hey, here's a critique. I'm with you on that. I think it works well.
Yeah, and if you've never submitted Paul to the WPPI print competition, the icon print competition, I would
Yeah.
highly recommend you do so. Unfortunately, this wouldn't qualify because it was captured at a workshop. But if you have the inspiration to recreate this and do it on your own, this would be such um, a phenomenal photo to do. And this gives me inspiration almost to do something similar as well. And I kind of want to. This gives me ideas. So with that said, you nailed it, Paul. So thank you so much for submitting, and I hope you had fun at Jonny's workshop. I personally haven't attended one of your workshops, and I've heard really amazing things. So one of these days, I'm gonna make it happen, Jonny.
You are most welcome anytime, my friend. And I will say too, for those of you who are curious, like that's actually a canvas backdrop that's on the lower part of the subject there. So we just wrapped a canvas around him because I didn't have any like fabric, and then it's just lit with an optical spot and a fill light. So there's a little bit of window light and a fill light. So really simple setup, but those optical spots are so great for creating that really, chiaroscuro laden Caravaggio style shapely light. Just the control of light there is a lot of fun. So if you haven't played with those folks and you have a chance to, definitely mess around with those because they're frustrating as hell, but when you get it right, it works.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Very cool. Hey, thank you so much, Paul. We're gonna go ahead and move on
Thanks, Paul.
since we got quite a few left. This next one comes from Rhonda Sebastian, and this was a model against a black wall. One beauty dish to upper right of the model. Okay. So it's my turn to start, so I'll start. So let's start with the pose, and then I'll talk about the lighting a little bit. So one thing that and for those of you who are regular viewers and listeners at home, one thing you're going to hear me talk about a lot is triangles, right? And posing your subjects in a way where their body is naturally creating triangles, and you have it a little bit here. So if you look at her shoulders, her shoulders are a little offset, which is nice, kind of forming this V. Oops, excuse me, forming this V down into her chest. You have it with her left knee coming in a little bit, but then you have her arms that are very flat, that are coming down. They're very straight, and they're not bending. And another general rule, and again, rules are made to be broken, so this is subjective, but a general rule to follow when posing is if it bends it, right? So getting the arms off the body a little bit, relaxing those elbows, bringing the shoulder maybe back, just bringing the elbow back. It's going to help create some nice flattering triangles. It's going to be a little bit more flattering of a pose because right here she's just very closed off, right? You're bringing not that she is a not like a fit model or anything, but when your arms are closed and your body's closed, it brings more attention to just your body as a whole. But when you can relax, bring your arms out, that helps create that separation. You get those more, especially with women, you get that hourglass figure. You can see the curves better, and it's just a generally more flattering pose. So that is something I would recommend. The other thing too that I'm sure Jonny would point out if I didn't already do it right now is it's cut off at about her shins, right? So typically you want to crop above the knees, right, or below the feet. But on the top of the knee to the ankles are kind of no man's land when it comes to cropping. So you want to try to avoid doing that. Other than that, I kind of like the hard light look. Like it's a very unique, it's very different. But you're broad lighting her, And I'm not sure I like that look. I would almost prefer this to where you're lighting with this, assuming you're leaving the same pose, you're lighting her from camera right, so you just get that little short light on the left side of her face, and it's almost a little bit more of a moody kind of dramatic image, which I think would allude a little bit more, or would play off a little bit better, I should say, with that hard light look that we're going for. um Jonny, what, you're more eloquent at putting your words together with all of this. So how would you rephrase that, or what would you add to that?
No, no, I agree. I mean, I have very similar notes. Once again, I think this is one of those instances where it's like the pose is so for me close. You know, the staggered knees, the staggered shoulders, one shoulder being up higher and forward, like we're creating that shape there, but the same, like the hands being flat and the symmetry in the hands, even one of those hands sort of drawing up on the body to create some shape and some differential left to right, I think would add a lot of visual intrigue. You know, I like you, I enjoy the light here a lot, to be completely honest. I love the beauty dish. And, you know, Rhonda, I think you did a really great job with placement here. Also, I'm going to be assumptive. We didn't hear about your post processing. What I often see in instances like this with hard light is you'll see a massive shift in skin tone from the face to the legs. And it feels like you took the time to make sure that skin tone fidelity was solid for her legs, where that light's falling off. We're not seeing a shift in her skin tone to purple or blue or anything like that with her fair skin, especially in the shadows. So well done, whether you did that on set or in post. Really, really good eye for making sure that skin looks great top to bottom. I agree. I think there could be more visual intrigue if we moved into that short side light. For me, what throws me off more than anything else, interestingly enough, is I would just love to see her in a different top here. And I think that the pose is dramatic, the lighting's very dramatic, and overall the top just doesn't tell that story. The top doesn't feel like it's appropriate for the light. So even if it was a similar cut of shirt, if it was all black, you know, or a solid
Yeah,
color of some sort, and maybe there was some accessory, because she has such a lovely face. She has a very timeless face, a very painterly face. The lighting's very painterly, and then it's a very kind of like modern standard top. So I think with just a little bit of difference in the styling there, even if we
very good
kept the
call.
pose, even if we kept everything else, that would elevate the photo in a really big way. But in terms of lighting here, Rhonda, like really, really beautiful light and gorgeous processing here. Like obviously she has really nice skin to begin with, but the way that you've actually played with contrast here and the tonality of it, it's really, really lovely and impressive to me. And I find it very, very compelling.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, yeah, nothing else to say on that, but Rhonda, super cool. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
submitting. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Way to kill it with the single light.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move on. This next image is very, very interesting. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. This is from Laura Dark, and Laura says, "All right, here's the breakdown. The key light, Westcott FJ 400, and a 7
Boom.
foot white
Ooh.
bounce umbrella with diffusion. Shot at okay, and then the accent lights, two Westcott FJ 400s." In 1x3 gridded strip boxes for subtle edge highlights. The hairlight pop was with another Westcott 400 with a snoot and orange gel to add a little bit of halo of warmth. The fill was a Westcott FJ 200 bounce off a silver reflector for controlled lift, and this was captured on a Canon R5 100 millimeter at ISO 400, 1/25th of a second, and at f9. And for those of you who are interested, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the behind the scenes photo that she submitted with this as
Ooh.
well, so you can just kind of see the lighting setup. So for those of you watching at home, you can see it. But Jonny, I'm going to let you start and
Yeah.
really break this down, because this is cool.
No, this is my jam for sure. And I mean, Laura, also, like, way to be a badass with your description, the placement of the light, having the BTS. Like, I'm trying to get better about that. So that inspires me, because I'll always shoot stuff and then people are like, how'd you do it? And I'm like, I have no clue.
I
I'm
just
like, I
did
just moved shit around until it looked right. You know? So seriously, I really, really respect you taking the time to archive this, because it's so helpful to other photographers and to you to be able to reference your own work and how you got here. I mean, right off the bat, before I talk about lighting or anything else, I just love these allegorical kind of religious themes. You know, I'm second generation Sicilian. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and while I don't agree with the ideology anymore, I really love the ritual of it. So,
Mm.
you know, this has so much ritual. It's esoteric. It looks like it could be a queen. It looks like it could be a high priestess. You know, it looks like it could be a tarot card. So for me, I really, really love the symbolism of that to begin with. really, really lovely control of light here. I mean, these lights are playing together so nicely. It's so classic. I can tell that you took the time to build these in one at a time. You know, intuitively, you made sure that these ratios are working. It's really a symphony of light. So really beautiful control of light. The angles, the position. You're working with really broad light sources, but you're using those directionally. So even using those big light sources, I can tell that you're digging that in camera right to make sure you're maintaining the shadow on the left side of her face. You're maintaining that shadow under her chin with those big light sources. So once again, I can't speak enough about the light here and how really, really lovely that is for me. You know, if I was looking at things that kind of catch me here, you know, two things. Number one, the way the light's hitting the knuckles on her finger, which would be her right hand. So those top two knuckles, especially because those fingers are tattooed, since the surrounding area is all of that black material from the dress, it's not necessarily the brightest point of the image, but it's the most contrast based on those fingers relative to the surrounding area. So I think
Hmm.
even if we were to mask that down or bring that down just a little on the hands, it would draw my attention a little bit less to there. Unless, of course, Laura, your intention was to highlight her hands and that really lovely pose she has and the tattoos on her fingers. The only other real critique that I have here, or I guess not even critique, but feedback, is some of the texture around the periphery, especially in the top left corner and the top right corner. I always love texture in my images, but because it's this texture where there's no other texture, it's kind of like the hands, my eyes are being drawn into that upper periphery in the left. And so, like, subconsciously, I want to know what that is. Like, I want to know exactly what that texture is. Does it extend out beyond that frame? Was it cropped into? So I like it as an element in the scene, but for me, it's just drawing me away from the subject, her face, the story that's going on with this beautiful artistic styling and things, and pulling me into the periphery of the frame there a little. But that's really all I have to say. I love this image a lot. And even looking at this is inspiring me for some different things. So I really appreciate you submitting it and giving us a chance to appreciate it and give you some feedback.
Yeah, seriously. Great feedback for sure. And there's not too much I have to add, honestly, to this. There are a couple things. And one of them I'm gonna uh, position this in the form of a question. Does this bother you? Because to me, it feels a little off. And when we're critiquing something at such a high level, there's little tiny things that you want to point out that could elevate it even more. And one of the things I'm seeing is if you look at her crown specifically, and you
Yeah.
look at the point in the very center of the crown, right, or that whole little that piece right there, and if you look
Yeah.
at the other points on the left side of the crown, the color temperature is a significantly different, because I'm assuming it's because of that rim light and the light catching the crown differently. So
Yeah.
I almost feel like in post production, if you were to select that section of the crown and increase the white balance to warm it up and match the front of the crown a little bit better, that might almost look a little bit more balanced. Does that something that bothers you, or you're like, nah, it's fine?
No, no. I mean, for me, I definitely see that. And I mean, I mix metals in my own styling all the time, but it does look like that one panel is silver versus like a gold, you
Right.
know? So I see that a lot now. You know, the only caveat to that from my side would be, you know, if Laura, if, you know, the intention there was almost like moonlight, I think that's how my mind interpreted it relative to the scene is I'm like, oh, well, moonlight's really blue. So maybe that's
Mm.
moonlight coming in
Okay.
that way. And obviously that's just perspective bias, but I'm with you. And after you said it, now it's one of those things that I kind of can't unsee. So there is a differential in there. And yeah, I think a little bit more warmth there would help create some more cohesion from side to front. So I'm with you, Sean.
Gotcha. And the other thing too is just going back to the hands. She's almost like borderline about to do the rock and roll little.
With the pinky floating. Yeah.
Exactly. Do you think, would you maybe have her change that position a little bit with her
I could
fingers?
see that. You know, I
Okay.
could definitely see that a lot. I know for me, you know, I overshoot everyone. So if you're an overshooter, I hope you think you're in good company. And it's specifically for things like micro expressions in the face and hands. Like hands are incredibly challenging, and hands are one of those things that can just take it out. You could have a perfect photo, and you know, someone's doing the crab claw,
Oh yeah.
and it just throws it. So yeah, I think playing around with some different position here, and I think in this photo especially, different hand positions are going to drastically change the narrative of the image. You know, if her hands are clasped at her heart, it's going to feel very soft. If hands are together in something like prayed hands, it's going to feel very religious. If she's holding something or hands are like fisted up, it's going to create more anger and more tension, and that's going to shift it another way. So I would just love to see any variations you have on this, Laura, with those hands in different places, and see how that affects sort of like the narrative and the feel of the image overall.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
But
hey,
lovely, lovely image.
yeah, no kidding. Such an awesome photo. Thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah,
And again, thank you for that behind the scenes image that you provided and breaking it down for everyone at home to kind of understand and get a feel for how much work went into this. Cause it's very apparent that this was very well thought out. So,
oh yeah, lots of
um,
intention and love.
absolutely. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on. This next photo comes from Josh Beaton.
Hey,
And
Josh.
yeah, we know Josh. We like Josh.
Yeah.
This was one light feathered overhead and a kick on camera left. He wanted to represent a calmness while the world around you is crazy, but also keep it a beautiful portrait. Um, so this is very indicative a little bit of Josh's processing style and his tonality. He has a very clear intention with how he processes his images, and if you're familiar with his work, he has this kind of this darker, cooler toned vibe to his processing style, and he also, one thing I'm also noticing is he loves those freaking feathers too. I've seen him use those feathers in a couple different situations. I don't know if that was
Feathered man, Josh.
right. um, this kind of reminds me. You know what this reminds me of? This. Do you ever see the? Do you ever see the show Shogun?
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
this reminds me. The processing style reminds me of that cooler palette tone of
I could
how
definitely see that.
how that show is shot,
Yeah,
and I almost feel like this, like if you just changed the model's attire, this could be something like from the set of that show.
step
And
right into it. I could definitely see that.
yeah, absolutely. The only thing that I'm seeing really that kind of catches my eye is a distraction is her, I think it's her earring on her right side. There's like a little bit of a glow there that I don't know why. It's so subtle, it's so small, but I notice it, and maybe it's just because it's like relative to the rest of the image, it's
Yeah.
just kind of shining back at me really sharply, and I almost would like to see that just removed in post production. But other than that, I mean, I always have such a hard time critiquing Josh's images because like he's such a phenomenal photographer,
Yeah.
and what he does is so out of depth of what I do. I'm just like, yeah, it's great. Keep doing that.
No,
So
I mean,
Johnny, I want you to jump in and kind of take over for me before I start stumbling more.
no, yeah, Josh, first of all, thank you for submitting this. And, you know, Josh is a great, great person, great educator, you know, and I'm a big fan of his work. So I'm going to be biased in this, of course, when we have that familiarity. But overall, really lovely image. I love the intention here. I think, you know, for me, this is where getting intention from an artist is a really big deal. So him speaking to this idea of the calm and the chaos, it creates a lot of context, you know, when you're sort of reading this and experiencing it in terms of what he was going for. And I definitely feel that. So I think you did a great job, you know, really pushing that vibe forward in the work, Josh, which you always do in your work. You know, now that you said the earring thing, it's funny, Sean, because I feel like when we do group critiques like this, someone says something and then you can't unsee it. Like I'll ask friends sometimes, I'm like, hey, take a look at this. And they'll point something out and I'm like, fuck. You know, because then once it's in my mind, I'm like, well, now I have to address that. So I can't unsee it. So I would second the earring. I would just say for me, too, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but visually in this image, there is so much dark, which is indicative of Josh's work. And we have the feathers, and we obviously have her dark hair, and we have this low key kind of charcoal backdrop with a little bit of gradient in it. But because there's so much dark, her right arm, the arm on the left, there's so much bare skin that's exposed that I find myself driving into that lower left-hand side of the frame.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, it's not good or bad, but I think if we wanted to maintain focus on the intentionality of the image as far as that calm and the chaos, you know, covering that arm with fabric, if we were going to keep the same, or bringing some of the feathers onto the shoulder, or potentially if it's shot as is, even cropping that in a little to take a little bit of that arm out, might balance the image up toward the face a little bit more and not have, you know, someone, especially a viewer who may not be a photographer or an aficionado, kind of bouncing back and forth between the arm and the face and the frame.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, That's yeah, couldn't agree more. That now that you say that, it's one of those I can't unsee it. The arm, yeah, it needs to either be more covered, maybe, or even just taken down a little bit in tonality or
Yeah.
like exposure. Um, but
Yeah, if it was like burned down a little bit or masked down a little bit, I think that would go a long way too. But it's just, especially because Josh does such beautiful work with these low key images like this. It's really, it's putting up a fight with the face, and I hate to see it because that portion of the photo is so striking and
right,
powerful.
right, right. Right on. Well, cool. Thank you, Josh, for submitting.
Yeah, thanks,
That's
Josh.
always great to see your work. We got a few more here for the night. This one comes from Richard Brodowski, and this was shot in a studio with a friend using a Amaranth 300C set to party mode. So the colors would
Ooh.
change every half second or so. Interesting. We used a large piece of lace fabric, and she threw it up in front of her, and I shot it as it fell down, and she tried to pose before it dropped. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What are your
Do you want
thoughts,
me to
Johnny?
start this off though?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
well, first of all, Richard, thank you for submitting this. Right out of the gate, it's like I think, for me, given my inspiration and things, I tend to see color before I actually see form. So when I look at a photo, if it's not black and white, like either the color is agreeable to me or it resonates or it doesn't. And I really enjoy the color palette of this. It almost has this kind of like jellyfish palette going about it. It's something like sea-like, and I think that works really well with the texture of that fabric and her face being slightly obstructed, because I could be fooled into believing that this was underwater, or at least we're creating the illusion of her being
Yes.
underwater. So
Yes.
I think for that, the palette works really, really beautifully, especially with her skin tone, the undertones in her skin and her hair. So really, really lovely work, Richard. It's funny, I've actually shot a couple of music videos with lights on similar things, just so you're constantly getting different colors out of it. But I've never really thought about doing it with stills, so I might have to do that myself and just sort of see what comes out of it. That's really great for me. The texture here is great. The fabric's great. I like the expression in her face. I think it's kind of like somber and almost like a little bit dissociative and detached, which plays with that underwater feel. I might like to see a little bit more of her legs here. And because we have that fabric, I'm guessing it's like tulle that's built up around her knees. I feel like with the position of her legs not being extended out more and then it building up top, it kind of like truncates her legs a little. So they're a little bit foreshortened because of the position, and then we're not seeing the lower part of the leg. So I think either having her shift off to a hip and extending those legs out, or even bringing that fabric down a little just to show a little bit more of the leg could make the proportions make a little bit more sense to me. And otherwise, I like the hand. I generally don't like straight fingers, to be completely honest. It's kind of like Sean said earlier, like if it bends, bends it. But I think here, the exaggeration, the straightened fingers on the hands to the heart, I actually like.
Huh.
It feels very dramatic and almost theatrical, and I don't know why, but I think like those straight fingers to me are like a contrast to the rest of the photo. It's also soft and it's glowing and it's flowing, and then we have this hand to heart with the straight fingers. And especially if that was intentional, Richard, I think I look for juxtaposition in photos, and energetically or thematically, I think that draws me there, and I find it very intriguing, if nothing else. But yeah, overall, I think it's a really, really, interesting image. And once again, for me, the play of the fabric and sort of the diffusion that's being created to her face with that, along with the colors, are really, really, really solid.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the hand, because I was actually going to ask you about that, and that seems to be the theme tonight is the hands and fingers. We
Going
seem to
back
be
to it.
we seem to be coming back to it a lot, and it does kind of work, because it's almost like she's like gasping, or
Yeah, exactly.
she's surprised, and I was gonna say what I was gonna say before you mentioned that is that I'm a little confused, I'm a little torn, because I feel like I would be okay personally with the hand like that if maybe her facial expression was matching it a little bit more, like she was a little bit more
Yeah,
surprised. So for me, I would say maybe a little bit softer with the hand placement, because you have you have this very like whimsical, flowy scene underwater kind of vibe, and then the hand doesn't really necessarily match the rest of the feel of the image. But
no,
like you pointed out, it kind of works, and that's, again, it goes back to what we said earlier, is that art is subjective, and and while maybe I wouldn't have chosen to do it that way, it still works, and it's still a great photo. And if I didn't have the information attached to the image of what Richard shared, I would have had no idea how he lit this.
Exactly. It's pretty wild. I was doing the same thing, and I'm like, is this happening in post? Is this happening in the moment? Is this a wash? Is there a filter on it? Like, what's happening? Which is cool because it makes you have to consider the image.
Right, and it's really intriguing. And I never would have been able to guess that. So it's really one thing I love about these image critiques that I do every month is it's really awesome to see the variety of how people are getting creative
Yeah,
with what they're doing, and it just kind of gets the brain juices flowing a little bit. You're like, huh, like how could I do something like that, or put my own
exactly.
spin on it. So
That's one of my favorite things about doing workshops in the studio here, actually renting the studio out, is people come in and I'm so used to being in the space and using things in a certain way that they turn that upside down. And I go, oh shit, like that's actually a brilliant idea. Like, why didn't I think of doing X, Y, or Z? So it's really nice just to be around other artists and their process and that type of thing.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Richard, thanks for submitting and giving us an awesome photo to talk about. We're
Yeah,
gonna go
thank you,
ahead and
Richard.
move. We're gonna go ahead and move on, and we have just two images left for the night, so we're almost
Oh,
through. So this next image comes from Adrienne, Adrienne Como to be specific, and this was captured with a speed light with a red Magmod mag gel and a mag sphere behind the groom. And the groomsmen were fighting over whose turn it was to use my smoke machine. And that's actually it's so funny because like this is the easiest way at a wedding to become a hero is if they're smoking cigars, you get them together and you're like, or cigarettes or whatever they're smoking, be like, all right, guys, like, let me get a photo. And you take a photo of either one of the groomsmen or the groom and you show them the back of the camera and they all go, whoa, that's badass. I want a photo too. And it gives you so much street cred. So anytime you see people, if you're a wedding photographer and any time you see, someone smoking it up like this, if you have the time, absolutely do it because, generally speaking, I don't know how many weddings you've shot, Johnny, but generally speaking, men typically don't get very excited over wedding photos. Obviously, we're the exception being photographers, but generally speaking, they're like, it's whatever she wants. I'm doing this for her. But then you show
yeah,
them something like this, and immediately they're like, oh, like
the
this
hype.
is badass. Yeah. Um, so really good job thinking to do this at a wedding, Adrian. And you kind of you did a lot of really good things here, right? You have the cigar, the cigarette, whatever he's smoking, close enough to his face where it's giving context to the photo as to what he's doing.
Hmm.
You have him positioned perfectly, so you have that nice cutout silhouette. And there's really there's a lot to like here. Um, the only thing I'm seeing is and I'm not sure if you're seeing this too on your screen, but I'm seeing some like hard. Maybe this is a post production thing. I'm seeing like specifically the left side of the frame on the bottom, towards the bottom and towards the top, this very hard cutoff, where almost like
Mm.
an eraser tool was used, just and it like you're cutting right through the smoke, and it looks a little unnatural, looks a little funny. And do you see that as well? Maybe it's just
Yeah,
on my monitor.
no, I'm definitely getting that on my side too. I mean, the Mac screens are obviously pretty contrasty, but I definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. So that would maybe be the only thing I would say um, you could change a little bit differently. And as with all silhouettes, whether they're smoking or whatever it is, you have to be very intentional with body language because you don't have it's silhouetted. It's not illuminated, right? So if you don't have both arms showing, it's gonna look like they only have one arm, and that's kind of
Yeah,
borderline uh happening here where you almost like you're not you're kind of asking yourself where's the other arm, right?
yeah,
So maybe if there was a way you could do something to show off that other arm a little bit more, whether that's cropping it tighter, and you just don't even have to worry about it, that might help make the image a little bit stronger. But Johnny, what do you have any tips on kind of silhouetted shots like this? This is the first one we've seen today in our image critique, so we haven't really had the opportunity to talk about silhouettes too much.
no, I mean, when first thing is, right off the gate, when I saw this, I was like, oh, that's really rad, and I'm like, this is very noir. Like, I love the noir aesthetic. So anything that sort of plays into that, like anonymity, and we have the smoke and we have, the hat and everything going on there. So I was like, oh, this is really compelling. I'm with you on the position. I think that's my biggest bit there too, specifically related to that right arm. Camera left for us, but the right arm there, since it's not being shown. So, maybe if a hand was in pocket and the elbow was drawn back and the shoulders opened a little, just so we can at least see, the shape coming from the top of the arm, like a leading line down. I think that would make it, just a little bit more reasonable so that we're not wondering where that other limb is in the frame. But other than that, I'm with you on that. I think that, things were just done really intentionally. They were done really well. And I just think this is really impressive. I don't have a ton of feedback on it. I don't shoot a lot of silhouettes, and I certainly don't shoot weddings. I shot, I think, 4 weddings one season, and my claim to fame is like all of the couples whose weddings I shot were divorced within a year.
Oh
So I
no.
was like, I probably shouldn't shoot weddings.
How
I
did you
felt like
find
that
that
was,
out?
because they were all friends and they contacted me, and I had like hit
Okay.
them up after a bit, and I was like, hey, how's your partner doing? And they were like, yeah, no. And it was
Oh no.
universal. So I felt like the only way I could market my wedding business was like, hey, do you want an annulment within 365 days? Like, I'm your guy. So outside of not really having a knack for it, I just felt like it was a universal bit, being like, hey, Jonny, like allocate your creative energy elsewhere.
Oh man, and that's funny. And actually, one of my really good friends, and I believe he's actually watching now. He was commenting earlier. His claim to fame is he's shot the same groom's wedding 3 times with 3 different brides.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
that's brand loyalty right there.
yeah. And if you're watching this, dude, definitely drop a comment because I always love telling that story.
That's a stitch. That is something else.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, anything else to add, Johnny, before we move on to our last photo?
No, no. I mean, once again, I think this is really, really well done. And I will say, going back to it, it's so funny because you've seen this thread of red, which normally isn't my thing. But I mean, I think the choice of red here was fantastic.
Yeah.
If it would have been blue, it wouldn't have carried the same weight. If it would have been purple, it wouldn't have carried the same weight. If there was no color at all, it wouldn't have carried the same weight. So given the fact that this was left in color, I think the red is really strong. It's really powerful. It plays with kind of this very strong masculine archetype and that type of thing. So I really, really enjoyed it a lot. Very, very well done.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much, Adrian, for
Yeah, thanks, Adrian.
submitting. Let's go ahead and move on to our final photo of the night. This was a
Bum,
last
bum,
minute entry.
bum.
Last minute entry. Literally, I closed it, and he's like, "Hey, can you open it again for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I got you, buddy." So this last minute entry comes from Kurt Walton. Awesome dude. This shot was taken for an ad of mine in downtown Los Gatos, California. Capture this with a Sony A7R4 70 to 200 millimeter lens, using a 400-watt flash, 60-inch softbox, about 6 feet away from the subject. It was an early morning shot. Just wanted the sun to be touching the tops of the trees, kind of for that a little golden light. It looks like so. Yeah, why don't you close it off, Johnny, and talk to us about this?
Yeah, well, first of all, Kurt, thank you for submitting this, and thanks, Sean, for letting Kurt slip in here last minute.
Of course.
First of all, I just want to say, like right out of the gate, I've said this a few times, but I'm very driven by depth. Ultimately, as photographers, we're working in a 2-dimensional medium, and I think a lot of what we're trying to do is to convey a sense of that third dimension. And so, the use of focal length and the time of day and the structure and the angle of this, like I really, really love the leading depth in this photo. It's really, really intriguing to me, and it's really, really well done. So that's the first bit. Absolutely. The colors are also really nice. It's very organic. It has a painterly feel in its own right relative to those blues and golds. So even the color theory that's happening here relative to the golds in the trees and the blue there, the complementary colors and things that are happening are really, really nice. I think, if I'm just looking at this critically, the only thing that sort of catches me immediately off the gate is the position of that elbow.
Yep.
And, the reason being is it's coming directly at the camera. And what happens is, anytime we have a limb coming directly toward the camera, fingers, elbows, knees, we deal with foreshortening. So, especially for her, this just creates the illusion that she has a very short upper arm. And especially with that angle coming in, it draws in, and it's not that it's bad per se, but it just doesn't look natural. So the proportions of that arm and especially the position of that elbow just feel a little bit unnatural to me, and it adds tension to a photo where she feels relatively relaxed and poised. So I think just by changing the position of that elbow, into something closer to the body or playing something like that, it would really create more triangles like you had alluded to there. And also we would have proportions that look more natural and aesthetically pleasing. Beyond that, I really like where she's at. I like the expression and everything else. The only other two things I see in this personally are we have that sort of pillar of white that's sort of just outside of mid frame, so just above by those trees. And it's that patch of highlight, and it's just really standing out because we
Yeah.
have the texture of the buildings, we have the texture of the leaves, and then we just have this cylinder of light there. So I think, just popping that out, this would be a time where personally I would just be in Photoshop and use generative fill and let it throw some
Right.
leaves in there. A quick fix like that, I think that would even that out. And then with that being said, the sign I kind of feel iffy about. Like it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really bother me,
Mm-hmm.
but I find myself continuously going back to it. So I think for me, if I'm evaluating one of my images and looking at it, if I find my eye going back to a place in the frame where I don't necessarily want it, I might remove that sign as well. But I think just by moving a slight adjustment with the arm and playing with that pillar and sign, like the photo is really, really great. And that would just make it, better and sort of polish it off for that last couple of percent.
Yeah, the arm, the elbow is definitely, I think, the Achilles heel to this image, but it's one thing though I actually really want to compliment you on, Kurt, is and this is a huge compliment. I would have unless you said something, I wouldn't have immediately thought that you used off-camera flash on this. I mean,
Agreed, wholeheartedly.
it looks like you use natural light, and sometimes that can be very hard to achieve while using off-camera flash. So and especially too, the fact she's wearing sunglasses, because usually the sunglasses, they're just elbow in the foreground is a little distracting. I would like to see her other arm too.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically the sign up top. In my opinion, it actually doesn't really bother me, and the reason I say that is because, to me, when I look at this photo, I feel like it's a fashion shot. Like we're advertising some sort of fashion, something fashion related, whether it's those pearls or the hat or her clothing. And I feel like when I think of fashion, I think of downtown Beverly Hills, where you got all those those stores with the signs all up front,
Yeah.
right? Versace, Rolex, Cartier, all that, right? And
Yep.
I feel like because that sign's in there, it gives me that vibe that you're somewhere luxurious and you have all those fancy shops with the signs out front. So for me,
I get that.
in a way, I actually think it kind of adds to the photo.
Nice. Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
now that you
just my
said that,
perspective.
Shushan, I agree wholeheartedly. And once again, it was one of those things. I wasn't seeing it at first, but I agree with that back arm too. Similarly,
Yeah.
if that shoulder was rolled forward a little and something was brought through there. But overall, once again, really, really, really well done, Kurt. And I'll just reiterate one more time what Sean had said, like beautiful, beautiful integration of off-camera flash with the natural light there. Like really, really organic. And I wouldn't have second guessed it as well. It's funny because when it came up, I was like, oh, this is a really beautiful natural light photo. That's where my mind went automatically. So the fact that, Sean and I are pretty trained on this and both of us felt that same way. I mean, seriously, like, two enthusiastic thumbs up on your use of light there.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, Kurt, thank you so much for submitting. Really cool seeing that. And that's actually going to bring us to the end of our critiques. That's it. That's all. That's all the ones we had tonight. So, what do you think, dude? Did you have fun doing that?
No, this was a lot of fun. Once again, I've never done anything like this, so I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to. But I think it was really, really cool. Normally, what I do is in the context of like, hey, I'm at a conference or it's a mentoring student, so it's a very personal. We're going deep diving,
Right.
into things. So it's fun not only to do this in a little bit more playful way, but to actually have the play off with you and to have you see
Yeah.
things. And I think that's the bit, everyone, that it made me realize. Like we all look at things in such different ways, and that's incredible. That's really, really beautiful. And this is also one of those bits where it's why it's so important to have a circle of fellow artists who can look at your work all from a different perspective and give you feedback relative to things. A wedding photographer, a fine art photographer, a documentary photographer are all
Yeah.
going to have their own domains to sort of like share with you. And I think that's really lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. And your perspective on everything was really cool to see, and it's great to bounce ideas off of each other and see how we both look at a photo and see the things that we both agree on and see the things that maybe you saw that I didn't see or I saw that you didn't see. So it's always fun doing these, and we've been doing these image critiques now for 3.5 years, if you guys can believe it. And
So
it's
wild.
yeah, it's been a while, and I still love doing it. And it's admittedly it's hard this in the summer to between wedding season for me at least and getting all this together. And I know it's hard for you all to submit because you're shooting as well or you're on
Yep.
vacation with your family. So for everyone that does regularly contribute, I really do appreciate it. It really means the world to me because I absolutely love doing this. And just to reiterate a note that I said earlier, if you want to catch the all the previous live streams. They're no longer available on Facebook. You'll need to check them out on YouTube. So please visit me on my YouTube channel so you can watch all the previous live streams. Last month we had Tashorn Jackson, and we had Rick Lewis earlier the year, like we've had, like I mentioned, and we have quite a few other amazing, talented photographers coming up on board. But before we go, Jonny, one last time for those who maybe were tuning in a little bit late, where can people find you? Where can people learn from you? Any workshops coming up that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I mean, you can find me on Instagram is the primary place you can find me, y'all. So it's Jonny Creative, no H, and then Creative. You can also go to my website. I just had, a couple of editors get pissed off at me because I don't think I've updated my website in like a year. So it is woefully out of date. So don't judge me on that. But it's just Jonny Edward, Jonny, no H, Edward, no S. It's like I have two first names because I'm a boring human being.
Hey, Sean Laura, I got two first names.
There you go. I mean, we both got the Jonny Edward, Sean Laura. But you can find me on there, but Instagram's usually the best place, y'all. I'm on all social media, but you can also email me. My phone number's everywhere. Just don't call me at 2 a.m. breathing heavy. I have enough of that going on in my life already.
I was going to do that tonight. Damn. All right.
So, I mean, if you want to do that, that's different, Sean, for you. No, this was really, really great. And yeah, I mean, I have a lot of workshops coming up, y'all. Like I said, I'm going to be teaching in Mexico, which I'm really excited about. It's really beautiful to know that people, around the world resonate with my art and what I'm doing. I mean, there's no greater validation. And this has been my dream, was to be able to teach and create and travel the world. So I'm so grateful that the community, sees value in me as an artist and educator and wants to, learn from me and hang out with me. That's still so surreal to me. But there's that's going on. And, I'll be in France. There's some retreats coming up. I'll probably run a couple more things in the States, everyone. I'll probably do one more workshop, probably September here with my buddy Eli Infante, who's an amazing artist. And then maybe something back in New York toward the end of the year. But honestly, I've been grinding really hard this year. So I'm also trying to book in some time to Netflix and chill and turn off the phone, get out into the mountains, do some kayaking, do some mountain biking, do some fishing, and just, reconnect away from the digital world to things that are, really significant and ground myself a bit.
Awesome, man. Well, when things slow up a little bit, this is long overdue. We got to get together, man, either for some beers, or if you're into fishing or anything, man, you want to go fishing with me or off-roading. I lean very heavily into that Colorado outdoor life. So if you ever want to do anything like that, dude, maybe get a tattoo together. I need some more work done. So
hey, maybe all of those things, right? Like we can just combine that into one multi-day kind of endeavor and just do it up. I'm down for it. That sounds great.
Sounds good, man. Well, again, thank you so much for your awesome words of encouragement and advice, and for everyone that submitted. And to all of you, as always, I want to make sure that you stay classy, stay sassy, and be dope nasty. Have a good one.
Stay gold, y'all.